Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of The Death of Art. We're here in the wilds of Newark, New Jersey to visit Matt Enger Studios. Matt Enger, who is formerly of Exploding Sky Studios, an organization that produced magnificent art through the 90s and 2000s, has a beautiful little spot literally in the middle of nowhere. It's like a perfect location for a meth lab. So let's go in and find out what he's been up to. Briefly mentioned Exploding Sky in the intro, like as in, you know, that you are doing new stuff. We don't have to go into Exploding Sky at all if you don't want to. But
we
I
can
guess
just talk about it from the history of being on Avenue B and stuff.
Right.
Well, we had a storefront there at 9 Avenue B, what, the early 90s? That's where I met you guys.
Right, the storefront with the burnt out car that was there for months and months and months.
Yeah, back then, remember, cars would just get abandoned and they'd just sit there.
Yeah, and then junkies would move in.
Yeah, and junkies would live in them.
And they'd sort of rotate around. Yeah, it was totally the Wild West out there. So now that you're here, I mean, I see you're doing a totally different style of art, and it's freaking awesome. We're into something like really new, but it still has that rock and roll feel to it.
Yeah, the thing is, my twin brother died 10 years ago of cancer. He's my identical twin, Mark.
Of course.
When I was putting his book together, since I lived and grew up with that guy and made art with him, I didn't really notice the changes in his artwork. But when I saw it on the computer, I had to find a way to organize it, so I just did it chronologically. And then by laying it all out, you know, by year, I could see his artwork changing a lot to the end of the book. At the very end, he was making these abstract paintings. I don't know if he just didn't finish them or what. But I took one of those abstract paintings and put it in the computer and made a drawing on top of it. Kind of as a joke, I've made an abstract painting. And then I thought, man, is it really abstract? If it's a drawing of an abstract painting made into an abstract painting, it's actually kind of, you don't really know what it is. I remember looking at comics when I was a kid from the 60s. They'd show like the way people lived, and like rich people would have abstract paintings in their house in a comic book. So I thought it'd be cool to make paintings of what abstract paintings in comic books are supposed to look like.
You invented sort of a new layering style using chemicals and varnishes and all that.
Yeah,
and these are examples of that.
Yeah, exactly. Me and Mark worked on it about 20 years ago.
Right.
First started pouring out liquid acrylic on sheet, like an old mirror or a piece of glass.
Right.
And then you paint into that and keep adding layers of acrylic. Then you finally peel it off of there. And then you put it on canvas and stretch it on a stretcher. So it's actually in reverse.
Yeah, this is really beautiful. It's one piece of film that's been built up, multiple layers built up, and then it just wraps here. But I get what you're saying. It's like in reverse. You do the painting elsewhere, and then in the very end, you put it on the canvas.
You don't realize it when you look at these things, the little, Mark used to call them micro shadows that the paint leaves, but your brain registers it, and it tells you that these are really deep, sometimes deeper than they are in reality. This is one of the ones from the ULAE gallery, 1990. A lot of this stuff we were just thumbing through the Civil War book and shooting pictures of the pictures in the book.
This looks like, what? Is this war footage from?
Yeah, that's that guy at Devil's Den, I think, laying there at Gettysburg.
I have a show at the Knitting Factory, and I'm doing a paper installation. And I'm like, well, it's kind of rough, it's photocopy, you know, it's kind of half-assed, but I filled up the whole space. And then I'm like, well, there's this Mars bar place that Max Fish place that's opening. So I go there like a few months later, like, you know, after the hoorah, and I go into the bar and I see this installation. It's covered the whole place. And I'm like, shit. They made a paper installation, but it's so slick. It's so slick and so, like, you know, like amazing to me. It's just like Warhol and Rauschenberg, but the step over, the next step, you know. And it's abstract, and it's figurative, and it's conceptual, and it's slick. And you know, so it was the first show that I saw that blew my mind.
This is another piece from the Maximus show. This is where we lived on Howard Street. This is not there anymore. It was the Baby Doll Lounge. But I love this sign because it was one of those old 60s ones. You see it in a lot of old 60s movies. Remember the Baby Doll?
That was a stripper joint, right? Yeah. I knew girls.
Did you ever go in there?
I knew girls that worked there.
Yeah. I used to go in there. They had a little stage, man. It looked like something out of an old movie.
Yeah.
It's been gone for years. One more piece of wallpaper.
Now, these are all just classic screen prints, right?
Yeah.
Which is 90. It seems like there's the bulk of what these guys were doing was screen printing. Lots and lots of screen printing.
This was for Catherine Melandrano's store in Soho. She's a designer. The name of this show was called Streets of New York, with this model that we shot. One of these girls here, she's looking up like that, and I had red paint drips coming down on her face. The opening was September 11th, 2001. So it got canceled.
Why? I don't understand. That's some bad luck.
I know, but it was called Streets of New York with see if I can find the invite. The girl's looking up like this with red paint drips coming down her face.
Pretty prophetic in a way, if you think about it. Jesus.
Oh, one thing that kind of helped me launch into abstract too are these. I started making these ink drawings about 20 years ago when I was bored. They're kind of verging on abstract a little bit just because they're drippy. When you make artwork, it's got real images in it. You constantly find yourself, you know, does that look right? Does that look right? What are people going to think when they see this image that everybody knows about? You don't have to think of any of that when you make abstract paintings. You just got to think about paint moving around, which is to me the most exciting thing there is in artwork.
So sometimes, if you really want to look into the soul of an artist, you have to visit his bathroom. Now take a look at this, guys. So you notice the guy doesn't shave. There's probably a good reason. And in here, there's this whole sort of personal, almost like a little shrine. This is Matt Enger when he was very young. I knew him when I met him. Probably a relative of his. This is just gorgeous mishmash of what he has in his personal life. And this is an old exploding sky up here. That looks like an African war shield. And I just thought you guys really needed to see this. So this is a lot of the Civil War imagery that permeated paintings. Matt Enger's from the South, he's from Oklahoma. These are issues that are still discussed and that he grew up with. Do you think it actually hurt you that you were using a lot of this imagery in terms of being in the art market? I mean, there's, again, guns, Civil War imagery, skulls.
Well, I got tired of hearing about it.
You got tired of hearing about it?
Yeah.
How's that?
Because people are so closed-minded, especially
Right.
people who still call themselves so-called artists.
Right.
They're the most closed-minded people I ever met in New York were the artists.
In the 90s, actually, I remember you guys were getting a lot of attention, but it seemed at a certain point there was just, they didn't want to know about it. This was
Right.
not what we want to see in art.
It's not like me and my brother ever tried to be political, because I don't consider myself a political person. I don't care what people believe or don't believe. I just know what I like about history and American history. I still like the painting, I just don't want to make them like that anymore.
You know, I keep looking at these things, and this is the exact kind of art I absolutely dislike. Yet I'm strangely drawn to them, and there's something else going on here. I can't put my finger on it. You mentioned the little micro shadows. That's not all of it. They have a real powerful rock and roll
It's the
feel to
comic
it.
book thing too.
Everybody has gone abstract, and it's an oversaturation. It's been 20 years, and you know, like what, 50 years of abstraction, and you know, millions of artists doing abstract. And to me, abstraction is mind control. So I'll say it again. Abstraction is mind control. The big lesson I learned everything from them. So it's hard for me to criticize them, but especially when they go into full abstraction, then it's just the end of the world for me. But you know, they were my teachers, but they taught me this. It doesn't have words, and it was this. This was, you know, art, figurative art. Layers. And you know, you could have abstraction, layer abstraction, but you could have the silk screen, you could have drawing, you could have painting, and you didn't know where everything, you know, fitted, and then you could almost imagine from one shape, you know, with another shape, you could create a third shape, you know, and then that's like, that's where Dali goes into critical paranoia, when you start seeing other things in you know, what you're seeing. So, you know, I don't know, that's why I love them. And I hate abstraction.
I also one time hated abstract art. It would turn my stomach because I thought people were doing abstract art because they couldn't fucking paint. But now I know it's different because I changed and I love abstract art now. It's the only way to go.
Yeah, I'll go another one. Yeah. I think it's very hard to paint, you know, to do a good abstract painting. It's as hard to make a good abstract painting than a figurative painting or any other painting. It's the same amount of, you know, you gotta get there. It's not like, and it's gonna work.
Well, what I dig about these paintings is that there's this complete sort of sublayer that's going on, and all of these beautiful little things that happen, there's no way the human hand is doing this. This is the paint taking over. So you can get really, really close up and see beauty in all these little square inches here. You back up and you have the painting, the composition, which is all good. I actually like this one. But there's so many cool little things that, in other words, it's just all process.
Yeah, but that's why I have so much fun making them.
Yeah, right.
What's going to happen next? Discovery.
Yeah, that's art.
Yeah.
That is really good art. You described it perfectly. So Cyril, did we just waste 2 hours of our lives talking about abstract art in there, or did something else happen?
No, we actually wasted 2 hours of ourselves talking about abstract art, and it was well worth it because I never talked about abstract art except when I come here.
You saw it here first on The Death of Art. Please like, please subscribe, and please ring the bell.